And good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. Now, before we get into the lesson this morning, the video, I want to remind you of my really good book offer for this month, which is for February 2025, U.S. orders only. The death of Adam and the life of Christ. You know, there's a lot of controversy about what was the death that God threatened Adam with the day that he ate. Most people want to say, well, it was physical death. Well, there's problems with that. Really severe problems with that. This book is sort of kind of unprecedented. Now, as a direct corollary to that, you may not see this immediately, but believe you me, there's a direct corollary with Paul on trial. Well, why is that? Well, because people try to argue, well, the death of Adam that came through Adam, physical death, therefore there's got to be physical resurrection. Well, then we're told, Paul on trial, Paul said he was Pharisee, and the Pharisees believed in physical resurrection. Therefore, Paul must have believed in physical resurrection. If that's true, why did the Pharisees want to kill Paul for his doctrine of the resurrection? This book explores that issue quite in depth. Okay, so for the month of February 2025, and then I'm throwing this book in completely free. I'm not going to go into all the details and all the money you save. Just go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a wonderful banner right up at the very top. Just click on it. And just let me simply say you're going to save some good money. Plus, you get a free book. Okay? And let me tell you, just this book alone may rattle your cage. It may change your life. I have had hundreds of people tell me that very thing. This little book is extremely powerful. Okay, gotta hurry here. Now, I've been sharing with you the incredible importance. You know, we're involved in a study of Sukkot, the Feast of Harvest, Feast of Ingathering, Feast of the Resurrection, the Feast of the End, and how that correlates with Matthew chapter 13, where Jesus told the parable of the harvest. Harvest would be at the end of the age. That end of the age would be in fulfillment of Daniel chapter 12, which foretold the end of the age. And Daniel, in Daniel chapter 2, in Daniel chapter 7, in Daniel chapter 9, and in Daniel chapter 12, we have this prophecy of the end time, and then it's revealed that it is the divinely appointed time of the end. And more specifically, you got 1,335 days in Daniel chapter 12, and that brings us down to the end, the telos, the sotelia, of the hemiron, the days, the end of the days. In other words, the end of the 1,335 days. That's the appointed time of the end. Now, I shared with you over the last couple of days how the Old Testament writers said repeatedly their prophecy was for the last days. It was not at hand. And the New Testament writers, but Jesus also said that the first century was the appointed time foretold by the Old Testament prophets. I want to tell you, the word Kairos can hardly be overemphasized. Remember, this word, Kairos, means divinely appointed time. Now, as I've already pointed out, Kairos can refer to different appointed times. Daniel chapter 8, it's the divinely appointed time for the end of the Grecian Empire. Well, the Grecian Empire was one of the four empires foretold by Daniel. So Daniel uses Kairos to speak of the divinely appointed time for the Grecian Empire. And Kairos is used with really some kind of mundane things like the appointed times of the seasons. We would call that spring, summer, fall, and winter. Okay? It doesn't tell you the day and the hour of the appointment by any means, but it tells you, hey, we've got divinely appointed times. So the point that I've been wanting to emphasize is how the New Testament writers, and once again, Jesus also, repeatedly, insistently said they 2,000 years ago were living in the appointed time foretold by the prophets. Jesus even lamented in Luke chapter 12, Luke chapter 19. You are able, speaking to the Jews, the recalcitrant, rebellious, disobedient Jews, you are able to tell the times and the seasons, but you are not yet able to tell what time, Kairos, it is. In other words, Jesus was saying, how can you be so blind? You can look and you can see, well, red sky at night, etc., etc. But you can't even see what time it is theologically, eschatologically. Jesus said, you don't even know the things, the time, that would make for your peace, O Jerusalem. So, I'm going to focus this morning on the time I have left on one critical text. Now, look, there are many, many, many uses of Kairos in the New Testament that are absolutely equally impressive. But I am looking at 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 5 through 17. And the reason I'm doing it is because we have so many constituent elements of eschatology found in this one single text. So in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 5, Peter says that Christ was ready, from the Greek word hitoimos. The Greek word hitoimos is used to speak of a bride adorned, prepared for her husband. Well, that means she's all dressed up for the day of the wedding. It doesn't mean she is a single woman, unengaged. It means the time of the wedding has arrived and she's ready for it. But Peter said Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. Well, wait a minute. What is the time of the judgment of the living and the dead? Well, Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1 and 2, I charge you therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who is about to judge the living and the dead, now watch this, at his appearing and his kingdom. So here in, guess what? 2 Timothy chapter 4, we have the judgment, the resurrection, the parousia of Christ, it's actually Epiphany if I remember correctly, and the kingdom. And this judgment was about to take place. It's the judgment of the living and the dead. So here's Paul affirming that the judgment of the living and the dead had drawn near. The time it was just about there, or had arrived. Here's Peter saying Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. Then, in verse 7, Peter says, the end, the telos, which is part of the soon to Leah. It is the consummation. It is the goal. Telos can have one or two meanings. It can mean termination, but can also, and very, 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 very commonly does, termination through consummation, meaning the goal has been reached. Do you catch the power of that? Paul said, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, he mentions several events that took place under the old law in Israel's Exodus. And he says those things happened unto them. And it does not say, ladies and gentlemen, this is a bad translation. It does not say those things happened as examples for us. No. The Greek word says, the Greek text says, those things happened as types, tupoi, of us. Those events were typological. Now watch, Paul's writing 2,000 years ago. They were types of us, upon whom the ends, the telos, the ends of the ages has arrived. Folks, it's just a different way of saying, and many Greek scholars, Davidson, Wright, France, Nanos, etc., a different way of saying the goal of all previous ages has arrived in our generation. Destination arrived. You know, when I was a real young kid, my family, we used to travel back and forth to California very, very commonly because my dad was on a retainer as a produce manager, and they just moved us around everywhere. And when we got in the car and Dad started the car, we hadn't arrived. The telos had not been reached. It was far off. You know, kind of like Daniel being told the time of the end was far off. But as we would travel, we'd go through Texas, go through the Panhandle, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and you're getting closer and closer and closer. And guess what? When you would reach California, the end was near. When we reached Watsonville, California, we had reached the goal of our journey. We had reached the telos. Folks, this is what's involved in telos. So Peter says, the end of all things, the goal of everything has come. He uses the Greek perfect tense. The goal has arrived. Now, folks, you don't say the goal has arrived if the goal is still 2,000 years away. You don't say the goal has arrived if you're not living in the Fourth Empire. You don't say we're living in the days of the arrival of the goal of all of the previous ages, unless they were genuinely living in the appointed time of the end. And then in verse 17, the apostle said, the time has come for the judgment to begin at the house of God. Now let's back up and let's analyze. It doesn't say time has come. No. It is to Kairos. The divinely appointed time has come And then he says, and unfortunately, many translations ignore it. Many translations simply say, the time has come for judgment. No. Literally, the time has come for the judgment to begin at the house of God. And if it first begin at us, what shall be the end of those who do not obey the gospel? Folks, what is he saying? The divinely appointed time of the end, the telos, has arrived. The Kairos, the appointed time for the judgment. Now, let's get just a tiny bit technical here. I'm not a Greek scholar, but I know this. When he says the judgment, it is to krino. And it means literally the, definitely the judgment. Well, what is the only judgment that is mentioned in the text? Well, Peter's using what Daniel Wallace, preeminent Greek grammarian, says is the anaphoric article. The anaphoric article is used by a writer or a speaker when he has introduced a subject, and then as he continues his discussion, he wants to refer back to that subject, so he uses the definite article. Simply stated, that means that verse 17, the appointed time for the judgment, is referring right back to verse 5. Christ was ready to judge the living and the dead. And now Peter is saying the time has arrived. The divinely appointed time has arrived. Folks, the time of the judgment and the resurrection in Daniel's day had not arrived. Daniel, go your way. It's a long time off. It was not near. But John in Revelation was told, don't seal the book, for the time has come. This is absolutely unavoidable and irrefutable. Peter was affirming that the divinely appointed time for the resurrection, which is the time for the fulfillment of Sukkot, which is the time of the end of the age at the coming of the Son of Man. Peter was affirming that divinely appointed time had arrived 2,000 years ago. Like I said, it's unavoidable. Thank you so much for joining me on this morning's Morning Musings. Be sure to join me and Mike Sullivan tonight on Preterist Apologetics. And be sure to join me again on Friday for responding to the critics as I continue my examination of Brian Hodges' book, Problems with Preterism. I'll see you on the flip side.